introduction. So no mics, so I hope my voice keeps will hold up. I did a lot of talks and workshops over the last 2 weeks, so it's we see. I was drinking a lot of tea. So yeah, automate all the things. Like anybody said, my name is Sebastian. So let's get started. When we talk about automation, when I prepare talks, I always feel to have a motto. We should have a motto, and my motto for this talk is automate until the job is boring as hell. And by boring, I don't mean the annoying boring, the boring I don't want to do this. So with boring, I mean it's boring because a monkey could do it. So I want to push a button, and everything should work. Yeah, and so when I talk about automation in this talk, we basically talk about 3 things. We talk about the system configuration and environment preparation. So if you want to deploy your app, you have to have a server or where you want to deploy it, and there should run an Apache or a database server. So setting up this stuff gets kind of annoying. So especially if you have to do it repeatedly. Basically for dev environments or feature branch environments or whatever. So we're talking about this. The second part would be about packaging your app. So we all are PHP developers, and our applications get more and more complicated. We use Composer to install our packages. We use npm to use JavaScript libraries. We use Webpack to minimize our stuff. So our build chain is quite crazy. And all we have to do to get a valid app is under this topic, the packaging of your app. And so if you have packaged your app, of course you want to deliver it right where you want to execute it. And this could be different environments like the integration environment, the testing environment, QA environment, and production, of course. And in the end, we hopefully end up with something like this. We put all together, and everything works quite nice together. So there are a lot of tools you can use to do this automation stuff, and I will talk about 3 of them. But there are lots of alternatives out there. So you don't have to use this one, but there are also other stuff out there that you can use. So let's start with system configuration. Yeah, system configuration, you can use Puppet, Chef, or Salt. In my case, I'm using Ansible. And Ansible states it's automation for everyone. So it's deploying apps, managing configuration, and it sounds like quite the stuff we're talking about and we need. And what really struck me about Ansible is the second part, that you can learn easy, and that's definitely true. It's you can get going very, very fast with Ansible. So let's talk a little bit about Ansible. It's written in Python. Don't worry, you don't have to write Python code, only if you want to extend it, but that's most of the time not really necessary. It's using SSH to connect to your servers. So there's no agent. This is really nice because you don't have another attack vector, or you don't have to install a daemon on your server. It's working just over SSH, and you should have an SSH connection to your server. So this should work right out of the box. And I don't know if it's a plus or a minus. All configuration is done in YAML. So you don't write Python code or any other scripting language. You only do YAML configurations. Yeah. Ansible is based on modules, and there are 5 big modules built in with a lot of features. The first, obviously, is the package management to install software. It supports apt-yum and a lot of other package management systems. The second part is simple command execution, so you can run any command or shell command on it with it. And then, of course, service management. It's restarts or starts or stops daemons. And it does a lot of file handling, so you can copy files to your server or use templating to generate files. And it also has a source code management module supporting Git, Baza, and Subversion. So this is the stuff that's already there, so ready for you to use. So what do you have to do? So you have to create an inventory. An inventory is basically the list of servers you want to operate on, or some variable stuff like IP addresses for each server, or ports, or whatever you want to use. All that's different you can store in an inventory. But we'll get to it in more detail a little bit later. The second one you have to create are roles. And there are a lot of roles you have to define. So it's good practice to define a role for every tool you're using. So if you want to install an Apache, you should create an Apache role. If you want to use Nginx, you should create an Nginx role, etc., etc. And all the roles you create know what they have to do. So you have to define it, of course, but they handle the stuff that really has to be done on the server. And the third part we have to do at Ansible is a playbook. And the playbook is combining the inventory and the roles. So you can say, okay, I want with this inventory where our servers are defined, I want to run the roles X, Y, Z with this inventory. So that's basically all you have to do. And all these three things are done in YAML. So you only configure this stuff in YAML. And so let's get started and configure our environment. So we have to create an inventory. The cool stuff, if you use automation like Ansible, you can put all your configuration stuff in a Git repository and keep track, because you configure always only YAML files, and those are perfectly stored in a Git repository. In this case, I put it in, I call it ops, and create a directory. And then you can see there are three different inventories. In this talk, I'm mainly talking about the integration inventory, but you can imagine any inventory you want to create. In this case, I'm using an integration, local, and production environment. So if I'm running a job and I want to deploy my software on production, I can use the same configuration scripts to deploy it to my local machine or to an integration machine or whatever you want to do. So this is basically the idea behind this kind of inventory setup. So let's have a look at the inventory. So it's this one. What you can see here is, like I said, you're defining the servers you want to handle. You can define group names for them. In this case, there is a web server group and a database server group. And you can create groups of groups, and etc., and get crazy with it. But this defines basically where you want to execute your Ansible configuration stuff. Then we do our playbook. In this case, we want to execute our playbook on our web server group, and we want to run the role Apache to install the Apache web server. So let's have a look at the role. It's a good practice to create a role directory and create for all your roles, create this 4 subdirectories: files, handlers, and tasks. Tasks and templates. So, sorry. Files are basically stuff you just want to copy over to your machine. So if you have some files you need to go to your machine, like configuration files, stuff like this, that you don't have that don't vary on each step, so then you put it in files. Handlers, those stuff is taking care of starting and stopping and restarting your services. And the tasks, of course, this is basically the stuff that that is really executing on your machines. We will have a look at this in the next slide. And templates, of course, if you have a configuration file with some variable values, so then you can't use a file, then you obviously just use a template. So let's have a look at at our task definition. In this case, it's we have two tasks here. Actually, we have the install Apache task, and this is using the package module, and we copy our mod prefork configuration over to the server, and it's just using the file module and it's copying the stuff. And whenever the prefork configuration changes, we have to restart our Apache. So we have to notify to restart the Apache. In this case, normally everything is working from top to bottom. The only exception are handlers. So if you want to restart an Apache and you have 5 tasks that need to restart an Apache, not every 5 tasks the Apache gets restarted, so it's only getting restarted once. It's really nice with doing this with handlers. So let's have a look at the handler. Quite simple. We just have to use the name we notify, and then use the service module to restart our Apache. So let's do a short recap. We created our inventories for local integration and production. We created a playbook. With the playbook, we're referencing Apache role, so we created the Apache role. We created the tasks and the handlers, and so we're ready to execute Ansible. Yeah. So let's do it. Execute Ansible. We use this command, Ansible playbook. Of course, it executes a playbook. We're using the integration inventory here and pointed to the host file where all the hosts are listed. And then we just say, okay, we want to execute this install in web server playbook. So if you do this, you should end up with something like this in the best case. So Ansible is telling you, okay, I did one play, and this has 2 tasks: the install Apache, copy npm prefork, and in a recap it tells you, okay, everything went good, and I changed 2 things. So yeah, we should be quite confident that Apache is installed and the right configuration is on the machine. And if you run it again and nothing changes in the repository, you would end up with something like this. So everything went okay, and there were no changes. So quite nice. Even better, you can use --check to just do a dry run. So if you don't want to really execute something on the remote machines, you can use --check, and Ansible is just telling you what it would have done if you would have executed it. And you can use --diff with it, and you would really see what's changing in the files you would deploy. So really nice. The second thing is --limit. This is really nice if you have a group of web servers, like 20 or 3 or even 2, and you just want to deploy it on one machine. So you don't be sure if it's really working, or you want to compare your 2 machines, and you can run your Ansible playbook against just a single machine of your inventory. Of course, this should be at least listed in your inventory. So no more SSH to your machine, install it on server 1, SSH to server 2, and install it again, and now if you do configuration changes. So this is a big automation win, I would say. Next up, software packaging. So I'm ready to get boot. You can use a lot of stuff. I'm using and to do this. You can use Thing for open source. You can there are a lot of tools. Lately I see a lot of people using even Composer with the script part to do automation stuff on their local repository. I started with Ant, and I'm quite happy with it. It's really working. It's really working nicely. It's not the latest shit, I would say, but like I said, it's working and it's doing its job. So and it has some nice advantages we will see later. So what's Ant? Ant is written in Java. The configuration is done in XML, and just like the tasks we were handling in Ansible, the Ant is calling them targets, right? So just another name. And the cool thing, if you install it on Linux machines, or if you install Java on Linux machines, it's bundled within, so you don't have to worry about installing it. So let's start packaging our app. This is the Ant configuration. We start with the project tag, and we name our project. And then there's a default target, so a default job that has to be executed. The default one is build, so yeah, you can change it if you want, but I'm always using the default build. So, and then you can define with this dependence. You're telling Ant, okay, you first have to do, first have to execute target 1, target 2, and target 3, and you just define them. So let's have a look at a real-world example. We want to do our Composer stuff, and yeah, we create a target with the name Composer install, and then just put some arguments to it, like Composer install and no interaction. So because it's running automatically and it's not really getting user input. So that's basically all you have to do to use Composer install via Ant. And another example, for example, could be PHP-Unit. Just create the target, name PHP-Unit. You can set a description if you like to, and then just add the executable, and you're done. You can see you can quite do everything with it. Yeah, you can minimize your assets. You can do a cache warm-up. You can compile your dependency injection container, whatever you like. So yeah, you can use it basically to run any script or any stuff on your local machine that's needed to prepare your package. So yeah, let's execute it. Let's even more simple, as you just call Ant and it's executing the default target. So in this case build, and build depends on Composer install and PHP-Unit, and then it will install your Composer dependencies, run your unit tests, and that's all you have to do. And if you want to execute a specific target, you can just use and PHP-Unit, and it will only execute the specific target. So no more fiddling around with your local build chain and stuff. Just yeah, hit Ant and everything's working great. One thing I like about Ant is it has really cool IDE integrations. For example, if you're using IDEA or PHP Storm, there's always an Ant integration, and you just configure some configuration stuff there with where the Ant configuration is located, and then you can really trigger the Ant targets from your PHP Storm IDE. That's really nice. So we have our environment set up. Our package is ready. So we have to deploy it. And so let's do this. And when I talk about software deployment, you can do a lot of different things. In this case, we only want to copy our app that we prepared with the Ant on one of our servers or all of our servers, and then activate the deployed app. And it would be nice if we could do quick rollbacks if we just made some mistakes. That would be really nice. So I just said in the beginning, Ansible is also used to deploy applications. So we're already halfway there. all we have to do is to enhance our inventory a little bit, create a new playbook that is responsible for deploying our app, and of course we have to define a new role for this. So okay, let's get started with our inventory. So we create basically these two folders. We only need the group bars folder in this example, but with YAML files in these two folders, you can create variables that are specific to a specific host in your inventory, or specific to a special group in your inventory. So if we want to create variables for all our web servers, we create a web server YAML, and in our case, we're just using two variables to show how this all works. In this case, we use a system environment variable. We're using integration and the domain. So it's in this case www.projectx.n int. So if you would imagine if you're using a production inventory, this system environment would always also would state production, and the domain would be the .de or .com address. So okay, we're done with our inventory. So let's do the playbook. That's just simple as before. We want to execute it on our web servers, and we want to execute the role project X. So let's define the project X role. Same stuff like before, the 4 subfolders, and then okay, let's have a look at the task we have to do. In this case, we have to create the directory where we want to deploy our app in, and we already have to. We also have to copy the files to the server. So in this case, I'm using a version placeholder because I just want to make sure we have a different folder for each version. And in the second, you can see there's an app placeholder. We will inject this this placeholder with the Ansible command later. So this is the first part we have to do. The second part is, okay, our Apache has to know there's a new app. So we have to deploy a vhost configuration. And we're using a template to do this. It's a project xconf. It's located in the templates folder. And of course, when we change something or deploy a new Apache configuration, we have to restart. And you can see there's a tag, rollback. Just keep it in mind. We'll get to it a little bit later. So this is the Apache configuration. And then we already also have to activate the Apache configuration. So we have to create a symlink in sites enabled to our sites available. Just basic stuff. And of course, if this changes, we have to reset Apache as well. So we just have a little look at the template we're using. It's using the domain placeholder, the version for the directory, and of course the system environment to load the system environment as an environment variable to PHP to read. So just to remember, these are the two variables we were using, and we're using them in this. So, small recap. We enhanced our inventories with some variables for our deployment. We created the deploy playbook. I think that was 2 lines of YAML. And we created the project role and added the deployment tasks. So, create the directory, copy the files, copy the Apache config, and activate the config. So, let's execute Ansible. So, as I said, we want to inject the version and the application directory to our Ansible command. This is done with the extra vars option. So if you have your deployed app and you have tagged your Git repository, you just say, okay, I want to tag this application I prepared as version 1.1, 1.0.1, and Ansible with our deployment playbook, and Ansible will just do this. So I said, keep in mind we had this this rollback tag, and the cool thing about Ansible, you can execute specific tasks from a role or multi-roles if you define a tag, if you execute Ansible. So if you remember, we put the version in here, and if you deployed version 1.0.0, it should be on the server, of course. We just ignore the case where it isn't there, and we call Ansible just with the tag rollback, and we say we want to deploy version 1.0.0, and it only executes the task where it changes the vhost configuration and restarts the Apache. So we are immediately back up with our old application version. So deployment is done with a single command, rollback is done with a single command. Big automation win, I would say. Right, nice. So system configuration, what do we have to do? We have to clone the repository, execute Ansible. Done. For deployment, we have to take a version, check out the version, execute execute Ansible. You have to have an Ant installed, an Ansible installed, and this is not boring. This is not bad, but I just want to push buttons. Just push the buttons. And so, like I promised, we are putting it all together, and we want to end up with something like this. Yeah? And what we need is a build server. Yeah, right? That is taking care of all the stuff we wanted to do. You can use many build servers. I'm using Jenkins, yeah, and my examples are for Jenkins, but if you like to spend money, you can use Bamboo, or if you're doing open source, you can use Travis CI. Yeah, they are quite the same. So they execute stuff, and you have to configure them differently, but yeah, it's a build server, right? So Jenkins is written in Java. It's a build server. And you're doing the configuration stuff in projects. And the project is basically a job you want to execute. And it's coming with a Jetty, so a built-in web server. So you download the jar file, run java.jenkins jar, and it's firing up a web server. Maybe not the best way to install it, but yeah, that would work. But you can install it via Debian package, apt-get install Jenkins. Totally fine. And who would have thought there's an Ansible plugin that's getting quite used a lot lately. So, like I said, we want to do this stuff by creating or by pushing a simple button. Yeah, only a button. And let's do our system configuration with a single button. So all we have to do is we have to create a project or job, in this case in Jenkins. We're calling it system management. And then we have to configure some stuff. In this case, we're starting with our Git repository for our Ansible scripts. And we're putting it in. And of course, we want to say, okay, we want to run this playbook on this inventory. And for this, Jenkins is supporting parameters, and we can define parameters for our inventory and our playbook and list the possible options there. And then we configure the Ansible plugin, and I don't know if you can see it. Oh yeah, you can see it. We're using the variables we defined in the configuration here, the playbook stuff, and the inventory we want to use. And if we save the configuration and want to execute it, it will look like this. And if we want to build it, it's presenting us these two drop-downs. Which inventory do you want to execute? Which playbook do you want to execute? Build. Simple, single button. So, not bad. So let's do the same for the system configuration. And for the system configuration, we're doing two things in the same time. We're doing the packaging and the delivering. So let's create a job. In this case, we are calling it project x.integration because we deploy to our integration environment. And we have to tell Jenkins which version we want to deploy. So we have to define a version parameter, do our source code configuration, and here we are using the version. So we are assuming there's a tag for your version that that Jenkins could check out. And next nice thing where I use and. There's and is working out of the box with Jenkins. So you just define the target you want to run. In this case, our build target, and a little bit more Ansible stuff. We want to execute our deploy project YML playbook, and with our integration host, because we don't use any variables here because we want to. The build is called deploy integration, so we just use the integration environment here. So then use some Ansible variables, the version, and we have to define the directory where our application is packaged. In this case, it's the workspace, the current workspace for Jenkins, and save the configuration. And the job execution looks something like this. It's asking you what version you want to deploy, and has a build button. So app deployment is tagging a version in Git and pushing a button. Nice. So we have a system management build. We have a software deployment build. And of course you can imagine, okay, you have a project X production build, project X feature branch build, whatever. And so we can get creative there. And everything is executable with a single click. So, is this getting boring yet? Some kind of? So, yeah. Big win for the automation, I would say. Thank you for and yeah, that's it.
So thank you, Sebastian, for the very nice talk. So is
Do we
there
have
any
time
question?
for questions?
Yes.
Are there any questions?
Why do I have to click 2 buttons?
Damn you! Yeah, the system setup every time if you're running the deployment would be a little bit of overhead, I would say. So yeah, and maybe you want to have different permissions on the production environment or the system configurations and the software deployment stuff. Yeah, you don't have to, but yeah, I would recommend it a little bit.
Would it be possible to override some configuration files for a specific system?
Yes. Yeah, you can. So if you have a special host, yeah, you can. And in your inventory, you can define a group.
Mm-hmm.
And if you have a special web server that requires special needs, you can define a host inventory,
Mm-hmm.
and it's the host kills the group, and the group the everything. So you can define groups variables that are working for everything, and the group is killing this one. And if you define it for the host, it will override the other stuff.
Ah, okay.
So yeah. So if you have a host that requires special need, you can just get it in these host bars and put the file with the name of the host, and put your variables in there. And for this host, this is the top priority variable that's getting used.
Where do you get the version number from? How do you define the version number? Is it from a tag in Git? Or?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, you have to tag your version in the repository. You can create a build that is merging and tagging your stuff. That would obviously be really nice.
Can it be a build number or something?
Could be, but yeah, it's kind of difficult to explain Jenkins how Zemver work. So we're using Zemver for all our projects, and so we tag our versions manually or some kind automatically, but yeah.
You can go crazy. You can go crazy with this shit. If you have a commit notification, then Jenkins would get notified about this particular commit ID, and it can propagate this commit ID through all the jobs that are queued. And well, it can get complicated that way, but it would work.
You can set up whole build chains. And so if you have a job and this is after the job, this one gets executed and stuff like this. Yeah, you can really go crazy with it. And it drives you crazy after a while.
Actually, one notification there is the possibility to define this input variable for a version by using a different input tool that checks the Git tags. So you have to get a nice select box with all the tags present in the Git repository, and you can just click the tag that is present and don't have any copy and paste errors there.
Yeah, there are
plenty of
lots of plugins for Jenkins that make stuff easier and easier and easier, and you can automate even more. And for your integration build, you maybe don't want to specify a version. Yeah, maybe not the best example, but for production, obviously. But you can also set up a job that is monitoring your Git repository, and every time you commit something, it checks it out and deploys it to your integration or your testing system.
We're doing something like that. We have a live branch basically whenever you merge there.
Yeah.
Is it possible to place any configuration of Jenkins into Git, and for example pipeline configuration? And is it a good practice? That's the main.
Yes, there is. The latest versions of Jenkins support this configuration as code stuff, and you can, doing it completely in text and do all your project configuration in files. That's nice, but it's quite hard to get there if you have like hundreds of builds. So yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, if you start this way, this is really nice.
Is the rollback feature like an actual rollback feature, or is this just a tag?
The rollback feature is, in this example, we created a different folder for each version. So the document root is changing, and we just tell Apache, okay, use the previous document root and restart the Apache, and so the previously deployed folder is used as a document root in this case.
But if I would like replace rollback with like any other word, it would have the same effect, right?
You can use tags the tags are completely free, though it's names. Yeah, you can call it Kurt or Harry or whatever you like. So you can use any tag you want. So we have basically some. If you're doing different stuff, you're doing maybe some Nginx proxying to an Apache, and you're using Apache and Nginx, then you can tag all your Nginx tasks with Nginx tag and all your Apache tasks with Apache. And if you know I only have to execute the Apache stuff, then just call it with the Apache tag, and only those get executed. But yeah, you can choose any tag you like, but whatever makes sense.
Yeah, you mentioned rollbacks. Do you have any keywords on rolling back the database changes?
I knew this question would come. Damn you! No, actually, I would say the best practice is if you move up one version, that your database should be forward and backward compatible, so you don't have to execute scripts. I know that's not always possible, and it's getting complicated then. Yeah, but you have the tools. Yeah, you have Ansible. You can basically run some stuff on your remote machines, or you can execute a PHP script or whatever on your servers, on your database server. Yeah, this is when applications get complicated. The automation stuff is getting complicated as well.
Is there any other question?
I have a question. Does this approach assume that you should commit your environment variables into the code, into the repository?
There's there's a way to not do this in Ansible. We are not using it because the permissions for the repository and all the stuff are very restrict. So we have nearly everything in the repository, but there's a way. But I have to look at that. But there's a way. Like if you're using Travis CI, you can put your variables encrypted in your repository, and it's working. And this is kind of the same approach in Ansible.
Okay.
So you don't have them in clear text, but somewhere they have to come from somewhere.
Some more questions? So it's not the case. So thanks again.